They say some leaders are untouchable. They say power is permanent, strength is unshakable, and the throne is secured for eternity. But history laughs at that illusion. Every empire, no matter how mighty, has faced its reckoning. Every ruler who thought themselves indestructible eventually came face to face with storms they never expected. Invincibility is a mask, a glittering armor that hides the cracks beneath. The louder someone appears, the more fragile their silence becomes when truth knocks at their door. Power creates a myth that blinds not just the people, but the leader themselves. And when that myth grows too large, it begins to collapse under its own weight. True strength is never about how long someone can hold power. True strength is measured by how they respond when the ground starts shaking beneath their feet, when criticism turns into resistance, when allies turn into doubters, when followers start whispering questions that can no longer be silenced. That's the moment the mask shatters and the illusion of being unstoppable fades into reality. Look through history and you'll see it repeated again and again. The rulers who believed they were beyond challenge ended up facing the harshest tests. The leaders who ignored the voices of their people, who dismissed the pulse of their nation, discovered too late that no one is untouchable. Because no matter how high you climb, the foundation you stand on is built by those who believed in you. And when that belief shakes, so does the throne. The greatest mistake any leader can make is confusing fear with respect. Fear might keep people silent for a while, but silence is never loyalty. Respect comes from trust, and trust is earned every single day. The moment trust begins to break, power becomes fragile, no matter how strong it appears on the outside. The myth suggests that trouble never comes for the powerful. Reality proves otherwise. Trouble comes faster for those who pretend they're immune. Trouble comes louder for those who believe they've already won every battle. And trouble comes hardest for those who mistake their position for permanence. So the question is not whether power can be shaken. The real question is, when the storm arrives, will the leader stand tall and evolve, or will they crumble under the weight of their own myth? Every voice of resistance is a sign of impact. No one rises to greatness without stirring waves, and no leader can claim to walk the path of power without awakening those determined to stop them. Opposition is not weakness. It is evidence that change is shaking the system, that influence is too loud to be ignored. The measure of a leader is not in how they thrive when everyone agrees with them. It is revealed in how they respond when the voices of defiance grow louder, when critics sharpen their words, and when enemies begin to unite. Opposition is the mirror that forces power to see itself without illusions. It strips away comfort and demands clarity, courage, and conviction. History shows us that the fiercest resistance has always been the furnace of transformation. The world remembers not those who ruled in silence, but those who faced storms and stood unshaken. The higher the climb, the stronger the winds, and when the winds of opposition rise, they test whether a leader has built their foundation on stone or on sand. But here's the truth. Opposition is not always an enemy. Sometimes it is a gift. It exposes blind spots, it reveals weakness, and it forces innovation. Without resistance, power becomes complacent. Without challenge, vision becomes arrogance. A true leader doesn't fear opposition. They harness it, they learn from it, and they rise above it. Still, there is a dangerous trap. When opposition grows unchecked, it can transform into a force that shakes even the strongest throne. Too much pride, too much dismissal of critics, and suddenly the opposition isn't just a few voices. It becomes a movement. And when the people rally behind that movement, even the most powerful leader feels the weight pressing down. The question then becomes, will power silence those voices, or will it listen? Will it crush resistance, or will it adapt? Because opposition is not a wall. It is a signal. It signals that the people are awake. It signals that the fire of accountability is burning. It signals that no leader, no matter how powerful, is beyond question. So, when the opposition rises, it is not the end of strength. It is the test of it. The storm that surrounds a leader doesn't just try to break them. It dares them to become more. It demands proof that their power isn't built on fear, but on resilience. Every bond between people and power is built on one foundation: trust. Promises, speeches, and visions may ignite hope, but it is trust that sustains it. When citizens believe that their leader stands for them, sacrifices for them, and fights for them, that trust becomes unshakable. But the moment it cracks, the entire structure begins to tremble. Trust is not something handed out endlessly. It is earned moment by moment, decision by decision. It is fragile, more fragile than power itself. Because while power can be taken by force, trust can only be given freely. And once it is betrayed, it rarely returns in full. Leaders may believe they can bend reality, control the narrative, or silence the critics, but they cannot command the human heart. The most dangerous moment for any ruler is not when enemies march at the gates, but when their own people start doubting them. Doubt is silent at first. It whispers in conversations, it lingers in disappointment, and it grows in unanswered questions. Then it spreads, and once it spreads, even the loudest speeches cannot drown it out. History is filled with leaders who believed trust was unbreakable. They thought achievements of the past would cover the failures of the present. They thought loyalty was permanent, but the truth is, loyalty is not blind. It is conditional. It stands strong only as long as promises are kept and integrity is visible. The moment citizens feel used instead of represented, ignored instead of heard, betrayed instead of respected, that is when the walls of power begin to crack. What makes this so dangerous is that trust does not always break loudly. Sometimes it breaks quietly in silence, in the loss of belief, and then one day it shows itself all at once through protest, resistance, or a sudden shift in the winds of public opinion. That is when leaders realize that their strength was never in their position, but in the people who placed them there. The collapse of trust is the true downfall of power. Armies can defend borders. Laws can protect authority. But nothing can protect a leader who no longer carries the trust of their people. When that bond shatters, the question is no longer about politics or policies. It becomes about survival. And survival demands more than promises. It demands truth, humility, and the courage to rebuild what was lost before it is too late. The stage of leadership is never confined within borders. Every decision, every policy, every word spoken at home echoes far beyond the nation's walls. A leader doesn't just carry the weight of their own people. They carry the weight of how the world perceives them. And when those two forces collide, the fire burns hotter than ever. On one side, there is the heartbeat of the nation, the people demanding jobs, justice, safety, dignity. On the other side, there is the gaze of the world, other countries measuring strength, critics waiting for weakness, allies demanding consistency. This is the crucible of true leadership, balancing the expectations of millions at home with the scrutiny of billions abroad. When the voices of discontent rise within a nation, they don't stay hidden. The world watches, international media amplifies it, rivals weaponize it, and allies quietly question it. Pressure from outside can be powerful, but it only becomes devastating when it meets fire inside. That's when cracks turn into earthquakes. Think about it. Global power is never just about military strength or economic size. It's about credibility. A leader may stand tall on the world stage, but if their people are restless, if protests fill the streets, if promises are unfulfilled, that image begins to collapse. And once credibility shakes, influence weakens. Rivals gain confidence, allies lose trust, and suddenly the stage that once felt secure becomes dangerously unstable. At home, the fire of expectations never goes out. Citizens don't care about the applause in foreign parliaments if their own children are hungry. They don't celebrate international recognition if their own voices are unheard. And that is the dilemma. Every handshake abroad means nothing if the grip at home is slipping. This is where pressure multiplies. Every global summit, every negotiation, every international conflict reflects back on the leader's ability to command loyalty at home. A strong domestic base gives confidence abroad. A shaky domestic base exposes weakness everywhere. And the higher the stakes on the world stage, the more intense the fire burns within the streets of the nation. The truth is, power is never tested in calm waters. It is tested when storms rage from both directions, when the demands of the world collide with the demands of the people. And in that moment, a leader cannot fake strength. They must either rise with vision, humility, and courage, or be consumed by the very flames they ignored. There comes a moment in every journey of power when the momentum shifts. What once felt unstoppable suddenly slows. What once seemed certain begins to look uncertain. That moment is the real test, the crossroads where destiny is forged. No leader rides on a wave forever. Waves rise, they peak, and they eventually crash. The difference lies in how the leader responds when the current begins to change. Some cling desperately to the past, hoping old victories will carry them forward. Others adapt, evolve, and find a way to ride the new wave with greater strength than before. That is the choice that defines legacies. When tides shift, they reveal truths that were hidden. Silence turns into questions. Supporters turn into critics. The applause fades, and in its place comes the raw sound of reality, the sound of people demanding answers. It is in that silence between cheers that true leadership is tested. The turning point is not always visible at first. It starts small, a few lost elections, a dip in approval, an unexpected protest. But these small signs are signals of a larger change in motion. Ignore them, and the wave grows stronger, sweeping away even the most powerful. Recognize them, and they become opportunities to rebuild trust, reconnect with the people, and transform weakness into renewed strength. This shift is not just about politics. It is about human nature. People will stand with a leader when they believe in the vision. They will fight for them when they feel represented. But when they feel abandoned, betrayed, or unheard, their loyalty doesn't just fade, it transforms into resistance. And resistance is always stronger than blind support because it is fueled by passion. The question is never whether the tide will turn, it always does. The question is whether the leader will drown in its force or rise above it by reinventing themselves, by humbling themselves, by remembering that real power never lies in titles or positions, but in the people who grant it. The greatest leaders in history were not those who never faced a turning tide. They were those who embraced it, who saw the shift not as an end but as a beginning. They recognized that collapse can be the birthplace of reinvention, and that sometimes losing control is what forces you to grow stronger than ever before. When the tide changes, it does not just mark the fall of one chapter. It signals the possibility of a greater one, if the courage to seize it exists. There comes a moment when silence is no longer an option, when watching from the sidelines becomes a betrayal of the very values we claim to hold. Every generation is handed a test, and the question is always the same. Will you rise to meet it, or will you wait for someone else to do it for you? History does not remember those who stood back and waited. It remembers the ones who stepped forward when the stakes were highest. It remembers the people who dared to move when fear told them to stay still. Every great transformation in this world has been written not by the powerful few, but by the unstoppable many who refuse to bow. Change does not come through wishful thinking. It comes through courage. It comes through the decision of ordinary people to act in extraordinary ways. And make no mistake, Every single person has that power. Every citizen carries a voice that can shake walls, a choice that can bend the course of nations, and a spirit that cannot be silenced unless they allow it. The easy path is always to complain, to blame, to criticize without moving. The harder path is to stand up, to commit, to step into the fire and be part of the solution. But it is only on that harder path that greatness is born. Right now, the weight of the future rests not in the hands of a single leader, but in the hands of millions. Young people with dreams bigger than fear, citizens who know the value of their freedom, communities that refuse to surrender to corruption, injustice, or division. That is where the true power lies, not in the throne, not in the parliament, not in the palace, but in the hearts and hands of the people. The fire of transformation does not wait for permission. It ignites when enough people say enough. It spreads when courage becomes contagious. It triumphs when the majority realize that they are not powerless, they are the power. So the question is no longer what will happen tomorrow. The question is, what will you do today? Will you let the moment pass, or will you seize it? Will you stay silent, or will you raise your voice? Because the future will not be written by chance. It will be written by choice, and that choice belongs to you.